When it comes to mental health, PhD students light up like the straw statue of the Burning Man. We're just jacked up with cortisol like wax in a candle, ready to be set ablaze. With the hot, dry, and high pressure work environment of the laboratory, PhD students are ready to ignite at any moment. And after feeling the heat for too long, all that's left are the charred carbon outlines of what once were aspiring students with dreams, passions, and desires. Now we have students that are just weathering the storm, taking shelter, and we're supposed to expect these are the new scientists, the people that we are tasking to invent and discover new things. I'm willing to bet that you got into research with big aspirations and goals, allured by the intellectual stimulation of academia. But after a few years, you've realized this isn't exactly what you signed up for, and the chasm between reality and your expectations just keeps getting wider and wider as the years go on. Now you've probably normalized being depressed and anxious and burnt out because you look around and, well, you see that everyone's on fire. And for some reason we think being on fire is normal. Now, it's not exactly the work that beats grad students down. Yes, the work and research is challenging, but we're willing to actually do this hard work because it's fulfilling. It's what we signed up for, really. But it's actually everything else about academia that makes this experience so excruciating. A pain in the ass. Now, institutions definitely have their work cut out for them to enhance, upgrade their workplace environments to suit the many needs of a PhD student, of a human being, really. But you know, you're doing your PhD right now, and you may be looking for that help right now, and you don't have much time to wait. And so in the meantime, I hope I can give you some perspectives, some tools to weather out the storm. Now, I'm reading the book Time Traveler's Wife right now, and I wish so bad that I could travel back in time to myself when I entered the PhD program, because I have so much that I would love to tell him so that he doesn't have to go through all these hurdles. So I hope you get through to the end of this video, because there might be something that can really help you out. Burnout is defined as the reduction of a fuel or substance to nothing through use or combustion. Take the example of a campfire. Wood is the fuel that's being burned, oxygen is the chemical that burns the wood, and heat is the energy source that keeps this chemical reaction going. When you're burnt out, it's your life force, your vitality that's combusting, reacting with the overwhelming stressors in your life. When you frame your lack of productivity or your lack of motivation in this way that you're burnt out, then your problems actually make some logical sense. If a car has burned up all its fuel, then it can't drive. And if we don't eat, we'll be quite lethargic throughout the day. But sometimes we take our burnout quite personally. We think we're just dumber than our peers, or we're not as hardworking as our peers, or we just don't have what it takes to do this PhD. I like to think that people are generally mostly capable of getting work done, of doing difficult things. And sometimes when we don't show up, you have to recognize that it's not you, it's your burnout. When I was burnt out, waking up felt impossible. And if I can't even brush my teeth in the morning, how can I expect myself to run experiments or hypothesize or critically think or write this compelling paper and publish it for the world to see? It just doesn't make any sense. You're going to have to dispel the echoes of what your supervisor, your parents, your spouse, and maybe even yourself and what you've said. That you're not working hard enough, you're not doing enough, you're not showing up at the lab. Because here's the thing, your burnout is actually a very valid and logical reason why you're not doing enough. Your tank is empty and you simply need to figure out how to refuel yourself so that you can work again. Next, identify what the heat sources are in your life that keep you aflame. Everyone has their own unique experience, but there are several stressors that grad students universally share, and here are a few of them. A toxic workplace environment, a berating or absent supervisor, working 24/7 in the laboratory, the theme of publishing or perishing, comparing yourself to your colleagues, feeling like an imposter, or even running 1,000 failed experiments. I'll have another video dispelling each one of these stressors, but for now, at least start identifying what these stressors are that are burning you out. A great way to do this is journaling. When we write down our problems on paper, it gives our burnout some dimension, so that it's not just floating in the nether of our minds without any form. Journaling can shed light on our burnout and expose some pretty dark corners of our psyche that we didn't know that were there. Kind of like a detective's crime board where they're pinning suspects and using string to connect the dots. We can figure out which culprits in our life are draining our batteries. For me, the root of my burnout was a constant feeling of failure. I equated my self-worth with my results or lack of results. My insecurity drove me to grind day and night countless back-to-back experiments, focusing on quantity rather than quality, because that's what I thought would get me to where I wanted to be. I viewed my progress based on how many papers I was publishing, and I wasn't publishing any really in the first few years of my PhD, and that really weighed on me. In my desperation to publish, I would take shortcuts. I would try to make my experiments run a little quicker so that I can pack more into the day, or I would quickly skim through literature rather than thoroughly reading it in depth. As a result, I conducted very poorly planned experiments and gathered really crappy results. And on top of that, I once had a senior scientist tell me that maybe research wasn't for me and I'd be successful somewhere else. And of course, that completely crushed my self-worth. For once, I stopped believing in myself. I lost all of my confidence. And I seriously considered whether I had it in me to complete my PhD. You know, after all, a PhD is one of the most difficult degrees that someone can pursue. So I kept grinding, trying to run away from feeling like a complete failure. And I found myself caught in this self-fulfilling prophecy, this disastrous negative feedback cycle. I would grind and overwork myself, come out at the end of the day with a worse physical and mental state because I wouldn't rest, and then the next day I would go into the laboratory with this worsened state and try to grind again. And after months of this destructive cycle, it completely drained me, burnt me out to the point where I could no longer get out of bed. And maybe you're in the same position that I was, perpetually stuck. Behind me were years that I invested into my PhD that I didn't want to waste, but ahead of me was a mountain of work and a thesis that I had no energy to do. It was actually the COVID-19 pandemic that forced me to take a rest, that forced me to take the space that I needed to identify what these stressors were and how to move forward. I was so bad that I could go back in time and tell myself, Jeff, you're burnt out and it's okay. Take the time to rest, regroup, and figure some things out. And now I'm here to give you permission to take the first steps that you need to heal from your burnout, to give yourself the time and space to think about your situation. And you intimately know how burnt out you are. And so please take the time to heal. After recognizing and defining your burnout, the next step is to refuel. Others might not understand what you're trying to do here, but that's okay. You can't control what other people think or say, but at least make sure that you aren't turning against yourself. Remember, it's very logical and valid for you to recharge your battery before you start working productively again. Your career depends on what happens between your temples, the activity in your brain. You don't acquire a PhD through good looks or athleticism, and so it should be your utmost priority to take care of your mind. So, first things first, dissociate yourself from what's burning you out. For me personally, I had to take weeks off from the lab. Doing more work or being in your stressful workplace environment would just burn yourself out even more, and that would take you away from your goal of becoming an effective researcher. To start, I had to remind myself that I didn't live to work, but I worked to live. So I want you to ask this question to yourself. What will get you out of bed in the morning? Pressures to succeed and publish have already burnt you out, so those are no longer good reasons to get you out of bed in the morning. But what are some activities or things that you can look forward to in the day that will actually get your day started with some excitement and energy? For me, I intentionally scheduled hours in my day to just visit a new cafe, to try a new restaurant, or watch a new movie. I actually returned to my hobby of drawing, which I actually stopped since starting my PhD. And this let me wake up with so much more energy and so much more vitality for the day. And after doing all these things that I enjoyed and revitalized myself with, I had an overflowing energy that I eventually started to use for my lab work. I actually highly recommend you to get Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity. I read this book and it really transformed how I looked at my day. The premise of this book is that feeling good while productive is actually going to keep you being productive because you actually enjoy being productive. Not only did I give myself permission to enjoy my day, it actually was good for my productivity. I was so much more productive when I just enjoyed my day more. So the key here is to be intentional with your self-care. When we passively and reactively attempt self-care, it can actually be damaging to ourselves. When we start binging on Netflix, or playing video games throughout the night, or eating entire pizzas to ourselves, that's more about running away from our problems than actually trying to revitalize ourselves. But if you're intentionally catching up on sleep so that your mind can function, or you're scheduling an hour in your day just to play video games, to give yourself a break and to take your mind off your work, then that's a little different than binging. So take a look at your day and figure out what you can intentionally schedule to give yourself some rest, leisure, and excitement. But also look at your life and recognize how you might be binging in reaction to your burnout rather than trying to deal with your burnout. Another thing to keep in mind is that you have to allow yourself to enjoy these moments, these activities that you've scheduled in your day. When we don't publish, or we haven't written a chapter of our thesis, or we haven't conducted 100 experiments of the day, sometimes we can guilt trip ourselves and think that we didn't earn these moments of rest. But guilt tripping yourself can burn yourself out even more. So when you're learning to enjoy your day again and you're scheduling activities into your day, remember these two things. 1, be intentional with what you're scheduling, and then 2, allow yourself to enjoy these moments. So once you've started to enjoy your days again and you feel revitalized, this is the time where you can start to think about increasing your workload again. And always keep in mind what you're capable of realistically, so that you're not burning yourself out again. The goal here is to rewire our brains about our work and our workplace. We've done the work to dissociate from the trauma of our workplace, but now we need to reassociate our work with enjoyable and meaning productivity. And we have to be careful here. If we jump right back in where we left off, then we'll just burn ourselves out again. Our brains are really good at remembering trauma and stress. My first week back to the lab after taking a hiatus, I only committed myself to conducting one well thought out experiment a day. And that experiment might have only taken 2 to 4 hours, but that's all I would schedule in the day for work. What I found by giving myself this much space by just conducting one experiment a day is that I actually had so much time to think more critically and creatively about my research work. And at this point, I was enjoying research. I had forgotten that our literal job description is to discover and invent new things. All these other pressures and stresses made me forget how much I actually loved and enjoyed science. I also added a 30-minute walk to my commute instead of taking a bus to and from the train station. And this just let me breathe in fresh air, feel the sun on my face, and just enjoy nature. And what it really did was remind me that life is so beautiful despite whatever went on in the lab that day. The following weeks, I started to add more to my workload. I was starting to do 2-3 experiments a day, eventually doing even 5 to 7 a day. And as I was increasing my workload, I was practicing self-awareness, understanding what I was capable of and understanding when I needed to take a break. I also set up boundaries throughout my week, where every weekend I gave myself complete freedom from the lab. After getting into a groove of meaningful, positive, enjoyable productivity, after 3 months, I gathered enough data to publish my first research paper. And then a year and a half after that, I published my second research paper. And then half a year after that, I had my entire thesis completed and ready to review. And then half a year after that, I defended my thesis. To get from the bottom of the pit of my burnout to this mountaintop experience where I have 2 research papers published and I'm defending my thesis successfully, recognizing and defining my burnout and then refueling myself was so key. Burnout is so different between each individual, so be sure to keep your uniqueness in mind. And I'm confident that these 3 steps that I discuss in this video will help anyone overcome their burnout. So let's recap. First, you gotta recognize you're burnt out. It's not that you're inherently dysfunctional or less than or incapable. Your gas tank is just empty, and that's it. And now you have a very logical and valid reason why you can't get work done. And so then the second step is to then define the flame. What is burning you out? Is it someone, somewhere, or something? Are past traumas creeping up to the surface? Whatever it may be, this is where I recommend you to write it in your journal and practice self-awareness. And finally, you gotta refuel. Figure out what recharges you and incorporate that into your day. Your goal here is to wake up with energy again and figure out a routine that sustains your energy levels so that you can go back to work. I truly hope this video has helped you. I'm on a mission to create content that I would have appreciated when I entered my PhD program. I know that there are so many PhD students out there that can benefit from this to either get out of a tough spot or expedite their PhD program. And a lot of people from other fields might find this content helpful as well, but I am going to stick to focusing on academia. So if this video or my mission resonates with you, consider subscribing. I'd love to stay connected with you. I'm going to be discussing a whole bunch of topics involved with a PhD, from skills like presenting and writing to perspectives like this video about burnout or other perspectives you might need to know going into your PhD. And once in a while, I'm just going to talk about really cool science that's recently published. And before I go, I'd love for you to write down your burnout experience down in the comments below. Someone out there might resonate with your story and not feel as alone and isolated. I'd love to read about your experiences, and maybe you have a few pointers on how to deal with burnout that someone could benefit from. And that's it for me, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!